we're going to talk about Graham Platner now. So I want to, I'll just go over high level what has happened, right? A few weeks, we're going to start back, when it all started. So Graham Platner has historically been a very sketchy candidate, right? He had a Nazi tattoo that he got covered up. Let's see. He was obviously in Blackwater, a mercenary group, like a private mercenary group, and he did multiple tours with them or whatever. That was the thing that I always thought was the most sketchy personally. He's also an alcoholic, right? So there's that usually tends to come with a lot of baggage as well. And a couple weeks ago, New York Times put out an op-ed, or maybe it was an actual hard news or straight news story about how Platner had a disturbing history with women. And I actually covered that. And my assessment by the end of that was that it was kind of a nothing burger. And I still stand by that story in particular was kind of a nothing burger. But the primary premise of that story was there is a lady named Fifield who was essentially a Republican operative who came forward and said that he had grabbed her arm once while she was getting out of while she wanted to go home and he didn't want her to, or something along those lines. He grabbed her arm once, which is, shitty scumbag move. Could be assault if she wanted to press charges, all of that. Not okay. And also, I think had made her uncomfortable by, cleaning his gun around her or talking, having fantasies about wanting to kill a home invader, typical ex-military gun owner, Republican shit, to be honest. So my assessment from all of that was that this doesn't seem that serious. And also there was another person in there named Rassikat. I forgot her first name, but she had mentioned that Graham Platner had come over to her house one time and that it had been a bad experience. That was about the level of depth that it went into in that story. And I didn't really think that much of it because that wasn't very serious, or that there were no allegations there. I can't remember if she had said that he had come in without being invited. Maybe she had mentioned that. That could be breaking and entering if you want to get technical with the law or whatever. But all in all, though, I was just like, this just seems like more sketchy behavior from a sketchy candidate, right? And I had always maintained that I was highly skeptical of Graham Platner. Out of all of these, somewhat left candidates, he was the one that gave me the most of Fetterman or Cinema vibes. I wasn't quite sure if he was going to actually govern in the way that he said he was going to. However, his messaging was on point. He was a good orator, and the people of Maine seemed to like him, and he was clearly the better candidate until now. So the other day, it came out that in a Politico story that that Rassikat girl that we had learned about had actually, she had told this to the New York Times, but she didn't want it to be published. That as a part of that weird experience that she had when Platner came to her house drunk was that he had essentially sexually assaulted her. There was a lot of corroborating evidence that they provided, contemporaneous evidence from when it happened, right? Which means that it's basically impossible for that to have been fabricated or whatever, right? Or she showed them text from when it happened 3 years ago. So these are obviously very credible claims, but this wasn't in the original reporting. But now it has come out in this Politico story that he had essentially raped her. And so this obviously created a shit show for everything, right? Everything going on with Maine politics. And there's a lot of things happening in regarding the actual political outcomes of this. And I want to separate those two things because we need to, right? There's the actual, victim here who was raped, and we should, all try to support her and not like try to in any way downplay her experience or whatever for political points or whatever, right? That is like number one thing that we should not do. And then there's the political outcomes of this. So I'm going to mostly be talking about that second case. I'm going to mostly be talking about the political situation, because that's what I cover, right? I'm a politics guy. So basically now it was obvious to everyone who immediately read the story, okay, Graham Platner is out. He is not going to be the candidate. Now that is up to Graham Platner to actually file the paperwork to get off the ballot, because he is the candidate right now. And my understanding is that he is planning to do that. He released a video yesterday saying that he is planning to do that, but he has not actually done that. But a lot of people have been taking this thing that happened and trying to score political points, I think. Well, there's two things happening. There's online discourse, which is like unhinged and vain and pointless. There's a lot of people who are going around doing "I told you so" victory laps, and if they want to do that, that's fine or whatever. But there's also a lot of people going around and trying to blame or conflate certain people and certain people's viewpoints when it comes to Graham Platner. Actually, I guess since I'm just rambling, let's just do the webcam. So in particular, there were certain people who were always skeptical of Graham Platner, myself included, but I would say that I would still generally defend him from the right-wing forces and right-wing lobby and the Israeli lobby, all coming to attack him for stupid reasons, right? I've always told people why I was skeptical of him, particularly the Blackwater stuff. But I guess I didn't really expect it to be like this. I was skeptical of him because I thought that he wouldn't govern the way that he said that he was going to govern. But anyway, but there were particular commentators like FD Signifier, Sean DeBlack, and then politicians I know like Chris Rabb had all come out and said that they did not trust him and that he should not be the face of any sort of movement, which I had agreed with. I did not think that he should be in any way the face of the movement, but I still thought he was better than the other candidates and would be, in terms of like obviously better than Susan Collins, right? A person who got Brett Kavanaugh, another rapist, onto the Supreme Court, So like I thought that like he would be better than her at least. So those people were highly skeptical, and I don't think any of them are really going around doing a victory lap because, like I said, that's pointless. That's vain. That is all for your own ego. That like any discourse surrounding like I guess what I would say is like there were also people on the other side, like Kyle Kulinski, I would say in particular, our dark woke commander, Kyle Kulinski, and even people that I respect a lot, like some of the people at the Majority Report, who probably didn't hedge their bets enough, if I had to say anything about it, in terms of what how skeptical they potentially could have been or should have been about Graham Platner. But here's the thing, and I think that's kind of there's multiple things going on there, but I think there is a somewhat of a bias in some people and such a desire to defeat Trump, especially from, I would say, what I would consider more liberal leaning political commentators than the actual like left socialist commentators, that I think there's a little bit of a blind spot there where they want to build up and present every possible candidate that can oppose that is speaking from a left populist viewpoint in a way that they think that will be incredibly electable, particularly gruff white chud presenting men like Graham Platner, putting them like boosting them more than they would for other candidates who are even more radical and don't have all the same baggage that that Platner does. But anyway, I guess this is kind of a ramble, so it might not be super coherent. I'm just letting people know. I'm just trying to process my thoughts on this. But anyway, anytime you get into the discussion, though, of you boosted him too much, this is your fault, or you did, like, anything along those lines where you're just trying to blame people and all you're doing is stroking your own ego. That's not beneficial for the cause. But I think it is beneficial to analyze why people maybe did that, what their biases may have been, so that people can hopefully learn and grow from that as well going forward. So like that's what I would say on that, is if you're making any of this about yourself, number one, it's rude to the actual like rape victim. Like, this is a real person. This is something that happened. But number two, it's not productive for actually trying to change people's how they behave. Because look, I like Kyle Kalinske and I like the Majority Report a lot. But there's certain, I think, things that they like. Kyle Kalinske is somewhat, I think, reactionary in his like videos and how he discusses things. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of things like this happening to him. Because if you don't have an ideological framework that is the basis of where you are coming from and what you are looking for in candidates, this is probably going to, this might continue happening. That's where the theory part of leftism and like socialism and all that sort of stuff actually plays a big part, and being able to analyze and make objective sort of analyses based on that or whatever. And when it comes to like the Majority Report and like Emma in particular, I think she's kind of lib coded, and I think that sometimes that just clouds her bias a little, or clouds her perspective a little. But anyway, regardless, that's all I want to say about that particular part of the discourse. The rest of the stuff, though, I want to talk about is all of the same neoliberal centrist, the neoliberal centrist forces that are using this for their political, like to score political points and to try to disparage any sort of left populist movement the best that they possibly can, right? Because a lot of them are going around and trying to tie Graham Platner, who was a bad candidate that was plucked by I think Fight Agency, if I remember correctly. I think they're like an ad agency. But they're trying to tie that to the broader Bernie-crat, movement. And that's because obviously they're scared of the actual left and the victories that the left has been accumulating. I don't think that's going to work, by the way. Graham Platner was not associated with DSA. He was not associated with organizers. He was not in the political sphere in Maine. He was plucked out of obscurity, right? Those people are always going to be high risk, right? If you compare that to someone like Abdul, who's currently running for Senate in Michigan, Abdul is like a perfect candidate. He was like a Rhodes Scholar. He had I think multiple doctorates or something. He has an extensive history in public health, and he has engaged in the political system since 2018. So like, there's like a difference there. But also the other thing I would say, like I said before, is that DSA did not endorse Graham Platner, and he did not come from the DSA lineup, because DSA is actually very diligent about who they are putting forward in front of people. And they are trying not to be associated with anybody who could turn around and be like a wrecker, right? And that's exactly why they did not endorse Graham Platner. And also they usually only endorse people who are actual DSA cadre members as well. However, that has not stopped the centrists and the neoliberals from doing everything they possibly can to try to make Graham Platner a boondoggle on, I think that's the right word, right? Like an albatross around the necks of like every single leftist who is running. I don't know if that's, like I said, I don't really think that that's going to work that much. That portion of the Democratic Party has been so disparaged, or like they have lost so much credibility in the eyes of the average voter. Like the Democratic Party has like a 40% approval rate. Like it's insane. It's insanely low. Most people don't fuck with like the Democratic Party establishment. So anyway, they're trying to do that. So I figured, let's see, that was like a big long ramble at the beginning because I wanted to go over it and go through what I'm thinking about it in particular so far. But now I'm going to throw it over to Joe here and Mika. Joe warns establishment Democrats, let Maine Democrats decide who replaces Platner. This might be a rare good take from Joe Scarborough, who I always say is one of the most annoying people in political commentary. He is by like so fucking annoying. However, this might be a good take. Let's see what he has to say. Let's see, because like I always think of MS Now as like just like the the liberal, like the generic liberal political establishment take is kind of how I usually think about MS Now. So I'm curious what he's gonna think about it in this video. So let's go ahead and watch this real quick.
To Democrats in Washington, D.C. Graham Platner was losing support with independents, no doubt about it. But I will tell you, Meek and I have heard nothing. Let me underline that. Nothing but support from Maine Democrats on the ground for Platner. Platner signs are still up. They think that this is Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and the Washington establishment coming to get him. They all have the same story. They started hearing 10 days ago that people were coming up to Maine and they were desperate to try to get Platner off the ballot because they thought Susan Collins had too much on him and would destroy him. I will tell you, without revealing any names, that we have been bombarded by phone calls and text messages from people who want Graham Platner off the ballot, who are high up in Maine politics, and we've been getting that for the last 2 weeks. So why do I say this? Because there's a conspiracy? No, not at all. Go back to what I said at the beginning. A warning to Washington Democrats.
Before he gets into this, I do want to say this is like, we know what the Democrat establishment is going to try to do with this. It's what they were trying to do with it all along. They did not want Graham Platner to be the candidate, but it's not because they thought he was a bad candidate. Like, I would have wanted somebody different than Graham Platner, who didn't have all of the red flags, but had the same message. And I think in general, that's what the average Maine voter wanted as well. They liked the message. They tolerated the red flags, right? They tried to put in, who was it? Nancy something or Graham Platner primary challenger. Who was it? Come on, Google AI. This is what you're supposed to be. This is what Google AI is supposed to be good for. I can't even figure. I forgot her name. Anyway, apparently, I think he's still, even post these allegations, like he's still doing better than the person he Nancy Mace. Is that it? That can't be right. Is it? That's not right. I can't remember. That's somebody else. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name. I'm terrible at remembering names, but yeah, he's still, I think, outperforming her when in a head-to-head matchup against Susan Collins. That just shows how little the appetite there is in the state of Maine for the Democrat establishment pick. And now my understanding of the process that they're about to do is they're getting a committee of like 600 delegates or something to try and who are going to then vote and decide on who the next candidate is going to be. That's not going to work, man. We already tried this with Kamala. It's not going to work. Okay, we can't do Kamala again. You need to just do another open primary immediately. That's what you need to do. It needs to be another open primary immediately. That's the only chance there is for the Democrats winning Maine. And even then, it is incredibly slim, because I need to tell people something. This is something that might break your brain a little bit. The average voter is conspiratorial and kind of dumb. Okay. The average voter literally thinks that Israel killed Charlie Kirk. Like no hesitation, no doubt. And I'm not just talking Republicans. I'm talking Republicans and Democrats. The average voter is incredibly conspiratorial and will believe whatever they want if it will align with their worldview. Right. I assure you that there is a significant portion of the Maine populace that believes that all of this was just Israel did this shit. That's what they're going to think. They're going to think that Israel planted or fabricated this information to try to get Graham Platner out of the race because they didn't want an anti-Israel person in there. There's going to be a significant portion of the Maine public who is going to think that. And guess what? Those people are going to be Platner dead enders. They are going to only vote for Platner. They are not going to vote for anybody else. No matter who it is, even if there's an open primary, they might still write in Platner because they're going to be Platner dead enders. So like, I'm just saying, the only way that you will have any legitimacy whatsoever that could even possibly, and I mean, this is slight, but possibly salvage this situation is only if you do some sort of snap open primary. Like that's the only way that this works. Anything else is not going to work. This delegates thing is not going to work. They're whatever candidate they pick is going to lose. I'm telling you right now. People underestimate like how how the average voter thinks and what they think and how conspiratorial they are, just generally speaking. Like there's going to be a significant portion that are going to be Platner dead enders no matter what. And the only way that you could possibly get some of those people to come on board is if you give them an opportunity to re-vote in a new primary. And if you don't do that, they're not going to come out to the polls. So anyway, let's hear what Joe's opinion on this is.
To Washington Democrats, you do need to listen to Graham Platner. Because whether it's true or not, just as Caddy said about her son who has been working on this campaign, rank and file Democrats who have been supporting Platner from the very beginning think that this was cooked up in Washington, D.C. with a lot of money behind it to find anything that could be found to get Graham Platner off the ballot. And I will say, we know nothing about that. Meek and I have been scratching our heads for the last couple of weeks going,
well, because they're right. They're right. They're 100% correct. Because guess what? The Democratic establishment backs rapists all the fucking time. Bill Clinton, Andrew Cuomo, I guess they got rid of, who was it? I don't want to say any names without knowing for sure. But anyway, those are two prominent ones. Joe Biden, he was credibly accused of rape too. You know what I'm saying? Because they back them all the fucking time. But they don't back them when they are a left populist. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad, by the way. I do not think that we should put a rapist in office under all of those circumstances. I don't think that Donald Trump, the pedophile in chief, should be in office either. You know what I'm saying? Like I personally do believe that rape is a bridge too far. Your politics can't save you if you are a rapist. You can have good politics, but if you're a rapist, I'm sorry, I'm out. Like, I mean, maybe that's a controversial opinion, at least in the Republican and Democrat Party, frankly. But it's because the voters understand, though. They understand what I'm saying right now is that the Democratic establishment and just Republican establishment and AIPAC and all the donors would not have searched for and pumped a message like this as hard. Well, it probably would have gotten out by the actual election, like between Susan Collins and him, regardless, because the Republicans definitely would have gotten it. But I guess what I'm saying is the difference is the Democratic establishment would have completely backed this candidate. They would have completely backed Graham Platner, and they would have completely backed him in the actual election against Susan Collins if he wasn't a left populist. They 100% would have. All of this sort of maneuvering that they're doing behind the scenes is because they want him out because of his politics. That's why they are cynical. You have no idea how cynical these people are. If you are like an establishment politician, they are incredibly cynical.
Why are we getting all these calls about Graham Platner needing to be off the ballot?
73-year-old woman who is just
like constant calls. So anyway, that's what Democrats on the ground in Maine believe. So Washington needs to stay out of this, and Maine Democrats need to figure out who is going to replace Graham Platner
soon
on the ballot. And if Washington thinks they can micromanage this and fix this, they need to listen to what Caddy's son said, because they're going to piss off their base, and their base won't come out and vote in the general election. They just won't.
Yeah, we should not underestimate the excitement that Platner instilled in people, including voters who had told reporters in Maine they hadn't voted in a while, but they found a connection with him. He, for all of his flaws, and there are obviously many, he was a charismatic, a talented political.
At this point, the only possible thing that can save them is, number one, they have to have an open primary, like I said before. But number two is just the Iran war tanking the fucking economy and people being so pissed off that even like Republicans are like, nah, I don't want Susan Collins. Like, that is potentially the only thing that can save them. And that's not a long-term strategy either. But like, I don't know. I'm kind of blackpilled on this one. I'm not going to lie. I think Maine is basically cooked. I don't know. I don't think that we're going to get a Senate majority at this point, because the fucking Graham Platner, by the way, Graham Platner is such a fucking narcissist, dude. I watched his video about like and I kind of, to some extent, I kind of already knew that he was a narcissist, but I didn't know he was this much of a narcissist. He made it all about himself. It was very Trumpian in that way. But anyway, I forgot where I was going with that.
Political athlete. People were drawn to him, and his messaging worked, and it's reflective, and we've seen this across the country right now. There's sort of a not a civil war, but a real debate in the Democratic Party and about which direction to go. And there's real energy on the progressive side, the anti-establishment side. We saw it in Colorado. We've seen it in New York. We've seen it in other races, saying we're tired of same old. Some of it is about age and generation, but some of it is about charisma and energy and speaking to the issues that matter to voters, like
Anyway, I agree with all of the things that they were saying. Generally, like they're right. They're right. If you don't replace them with, well, this is what I'm saying. It shouldn't be replaced. You need buy-in. I said this during the Kamala. Like, I wasn't streaming back then, but I said this exact same thing when they were doing this for Kamala. I said, I don't care if the voters end up picking Kamala anyway. You need the buy-in from the voters that they are a part of the process, that they are selecting it. If you don't have that, it's not going to work. Same thing here. If you don't have the buy-in from the public that they feel like they are a part of this democratic process to choose a replacement, then it's not going to work. And even then, it's a very low likelihood of working anyway. Let's go ahead and read this article. It's real short, about what we know and don't know about how Maine Democrats will replace Graham Platner, because I've heard high level that it's going to be some sort of committee or something. of like 600 people or whatever. I don't know. That's about all I know. This is by Ethan Cohen, so let's go ahead and try and figure it out. One sec. Okay. Maine Democrats are embarking on a 2-week sprint to pick a new nominee for one of the year's most important races in the wake of Graham Platner's decision this week to suspend his Senate campaign after allegations of sexual assault, which he denies. By the way, if Graham Platner was just even an iota of a movement person, of a person who is like dedicated to the cause and the movement of like leftism or socialism or even just left economic populism or whatever, he would have used his leverage to force them to do a democratic process to select his replacement. Okay. But he didn't do that in his video. I watched the whole fucking thing. He did not come out, and that's why I'm like, he is such a fucking narcissist. He should have come out and said, and I am not going to withdraw unless the Democratic Party sets up a new snap primary for the voters of Maine to select a replacement for me. If he was a movement builder at all, then that's what he would have done. But he didn't do that shit. So he just said, I'm going to, I will. Like, it's like he has all the power in this situation because he is the one who can just say, nah, I'm just staying in. That's what he could do. He could say, nah, I'm just staying in. And we'll see if we win anyway. You know, like he could do that. He could say, I'm not dropping out. What are you going to do about it? Like, you know what I'm saying? He could just say that to them. So I don't know. I think that, yeah, I was very disappointed with how little he used his actual leverage to try and get, a better outcome out of this after he royally fucked up this entire thing by deciding to run as a fucking, rapist. And he had the text, according to the Politico article, he got the text of her accusing him of violating her consent or whatever. So he knew this shit was out there. Anyway. Shortly before Platner announced on Wednesday he'd be leaving the race, the party's state committee voted to hold a nominating convention to choose a replacement before the 5 p.m. Eastern Time deadline on July 27th. But many details about the process, including when the convention will be held, who the delegates will be, and how exactly candidates can access the ballot, have not been announced. In a statement, party leaders said that transparency is of the utmost importance and they would announce additional details soon. Yeah, right. Fucking this brought to you by the same people who anointed Kamala Harris from Biden. Yeah, I'm sure it will be. The convention process could be similar to how national parties pick presidential candidates when delegates elected from each state are ultimately responsible for choosing their nominees. But while in the modern presidential process, delegates generally vote for a candidate based on the results of a popular vote, given the compressed timeline in Maine, it seems unlikely there will be a similar statewide opportunity for voters to express their preference. You could do it, man. You could do it. I don't think that there is a physical reality to not being able to set up a snap primary. I think that you could do it in a couple weeks. I think in a couple weeks you could have the infrastructure built out, like send out the ballots, or send out the ballots, have people come to the polls. I think you could have it done in a couple weeks. The convention, let's see, Yeah, the convention is expected to feature roughly 600 delegates, including around 500 elected from the state's 16 counties and about 100 voting members of the state committee. A source familiar with the process told CNN. Okay. So these are elected officials from the state's 16 counties. I still don't like it. I don't think there will be enough buy-in from the people. I just don't think there will be. And these state these like county these county officials, I mean, I'm going to guess that most of them are, DNC hacks. Like I'm going to guess that most of them are not are just corporate Democrats, man. I don't know. We'll see. The process for how which doesn't represent what people wanted from their elected representative in this election. The process for how those delegates are selected and who those people ultimately are will go a long way to determining which of the more than half a dozen hopefuls emerges as the new nominee, and there are more questions than answers. For example, who will get to vote for delegates within each county? Will delegates run affiliated with specific candidates, or will they ask voters to trust their judgment at the convention? Then there's the question of how voting at the convention will work. With so many potential candidates, it's easy to imagine no candidate having a majority. Will the party use ranked choice voting as the state does in primaries? Or will there be multiple rounds of voting during which campaigns can try to lobby delegates? Oh my God. Ugh. Another outstanding issue that still needs to be resolved. Platner is still technically on the ballot. Well, he said in his withdrawal video that he would submit paperwork to remove himself. He hasn't yet, according to the Maine's Secretary of State's office. He has until 5 p.m. Eastern time on Monday to do so. He still has all the leverage, man. Fix this shit, Platner. You fucking narcissist rapist. Just fix this one fucking thing, asshole. Jesus Christ. Okay, what was this? Okay. Oh, this is probably an analysis of this. So let's go ahead and read this. It's not that long. I just noticed the article title and I thought it sounded interesting. So, politics. Candidates need more than vibes. Graham Platner proves it. We've really lost the plot on how to relate to the working class by Christina Catarucci. At some point in childhood, through one classic fable or another, most of us absorb the lesson that looks can be deceiving. It's what's on the inside that counts. Promoters of Graham Platner's doomed Senate campaign in Maine disregarded that age-old warning, and now they are paying the price. Based solely on a collection of vibes they thought would appeal to working-class voters, they elevated a candidate with a questionable past and a troubling present. After a steady drip of stories that illustrated Platner's loose hold on morality, one finally tipped the balance this week with a credible allegation of rape. Scores of prominent Democrats are calling for Platner to drop out of the race. With time running out and the fate of a winnable and essential Senate race in the balance, party operatives are scrambling to figure out what to do. I want to be clear. The rest of the stuff was like, it was sketchy, and I held him at arm's length for that reason, or I hedged my bets against him, saying that I didn't really trust him that much because of those, particularly the Blackwater stuff. I always say it. That was the main thing that made me very skeptical of Graham Platner. But none of those things were disqualifying in my view. If you show that you because there's plenty of vets who become anti-war, right? Vets often become anti-war. In fact, some of them are the biggest advocates of being of stopping these constant wars that we're engaged in, right? So I don't think that that's an immediately disqualifying thing. I think it would be nice for you to show that you've changed. I think that's important. And I would like also, it would have been nice if you had the history of the acts that you have changed by engaging in local politics for, that cause or whatever, right? Like being involved in the activist circles, or your local DSA organization or whatever. I think that would have been a much better way to gauge if he had actually changed or not. But none of the stuff before this last one was disqualifying in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. I know some people think that every war criminal that we have sent abroad to do war cries at behest of our pedo billionaires is irredeemable. There's a lot of people who think that. I do not think that. I think that they can be redeemed, and sometimes they are some of the staunchest advocates for anti-imperialism and anti-war. So, but I would say that Platner probably wasn't. I think he's an opportunist and a narcissist. There are plenty of lessons here, but there is one in particular that I hope does not get lost in the moment of chaos. The Platner folly exposes the pitfalls of this vibes-based mode of political recruiting. Platner was plucked from oyster farm obscurity by political strategists and betrothed couple Dan Moraff and Leanne Fan. This is the primary reason that I wanted to read this article, is I wanted to know more about this process that selected him. I only know the high level, like fight agency stuff or whatever, but I am very curious about this. So Platner was plucked from oyster farm obscurity by political strategists and betrothed couple Dan Moraff and Leanne Fan, who paid for a cheaper, faster version of the traditional vetting process a potential candidate usually undergoes. Well, that's not good. Strike number one. Yet another old adage they ignored. You can do something cheaply, quickly, or well, but not all three. Moraff has built his career around a mission to convince working class progressives outside of typical political pipelines to run for office. A plain-spoken veteran with a dense beard and a closet full of grimy sweatshirts, Platner fit the bill. So they, I think that they like looked him. It sounds they're characterizing it as they looked him up and down and said, "These are the vibes that we want." And this is not to say that anybody who looks like Graham Platner can't be like a actual, like an actual leftist or a movement builder or whatever, right? However, I do want to be clear that there's this like adage that I've heard before, and I've even said it before, like look like a chud, act like a woke or whatever. Like I think that's how people say it. Is like undefeated, or it's a like, and I want to be clear, it is catnip for I would say like the generally speaking, like white liberal democratic or an independent and even conservative voter. It is catnip for those people, and it is a very winnable thing, especially if you don't have rape allegations, I think, to use that adage. But I also want to be clear, like there is a secondary aspect going on here, right? Where the reason that appeals is they are coding more conservative, right? And they are presenting their presentation, I think, is more conformative to this idea of like particularly white left populism that I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like it's not necessarily always like it shouldn't. I guess what they're saying is right. It shouldn't be the only thing that you're looking for or whatever, right? And also that can also be kind of like a red flag to an extent as well. Like I don't know. I'm still processing, so I'm just going to keep reading while I think more. His left-leaning ideology was essential, certainly, and Mainers have spoken about his talent for riling up a crowd with an uncommon magnetism. Yeah, he is a good speaker. That's 100%. He is 100% a good speaker. Nobody can deny that. But what really made Platner appealing to Moraff and Fan didn't have anything to do with the kind of person he was or what was or wasn't on his resume. It was his unvarnished aesthetic. Part of our thesis here is that people do not want their candidates grown in vast, Moraff told the Wall Street Journal. That's true. They want people who are real human beings, and they want people who do not look and sound like the vat-grown people who've been leading this country off the cliff for the past century, and that was Graham. That's true. That is true, 100%. But there's a way to do that and a way not to do that, right? Because like you could say also like, okay, for instance, like let's think about the opposite of this, right? Like Zoran. Zoran is he puts out the air of a buttoned up politician. That's how he aesthetically dresses himself, right? But he is also a left populist. So that's already kind of disproving this theory to some extent. But I think that it's more about the message than the aesthetic. I think that that's the thing that we should take away with. And maybe that aesthetic does work for independents and conservatives. Like I said, I think there's a weird, like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to say like white supremacist, but like white focused, white centering sort of ideology that is this like gruff everyday white working union member or whatever. Like when people think of like the everyday like union worker or something, most people just think of white people, like gruff white men. Like that's generally speaking what a lot of people think of. And so, but yeah, like if you compare Graham Platner to Zoran, who wore a suit every day, Zoran gave the aesthetic of a buttoned-up politician, but he did not actually speak like one. I think it's more about the speech than it is anything in terms of being able to capture that left populist angst. But anyway, I'm just going to keep reading because I'm still processing. Still processing. This is a shallow theory of how to achieve transformative political change, but it might have worked at the start as the start of an electoral strategy. Voters judge candidates in part by the way they look and sound, so it makes sense to consider this in a potential candidate. However, Moraff and other Platner backers seem to have ended their assessment there. Rising star political strategist Morris Katz, who began working with Platner after contributing to the blockbuster success of the Zoran Mamdani campaign, has said he decided within the very first minutes of their initial conversation that Platner owes it to the country to run for Senate. I think Morris Katz was in the fight agency or whatever, if I remember correctly. Yeah, founded the political consulting firm Fight Agency. Wow, I was it to the country to run for Senate. Morris Katz, man. Oof. Going from Zoran to this, yikers. Well, yeah, okay. Zoran just had so much more around him, right? Like his history was that he was in the DSA, like he was a movement leader. That was the difference. Like he had the history and the actions that showed that he was an actual part of the movement as opposed to just a glommer-on of the movement. So, anyway, let's keep going. What qualified Platner to be one of the most influential people in the country? He had no experience in elected office, no notable history of activist organizing, no college degree, no significant success in the private sector. Okay, wait 1 second. He had no experience in elected office. That's not a big deal. I mean, it helps, I guess. If you have experience, that helps, but that's not that big of a deal. No notable history of activist organizing. That's a huge deal to me personally. No college degree, who cares? No significant success in the private sector, who cares? Not even a record of pulling himself by his proverbial bootstraps, who gives a fuck? That sort of stuff is so much bullshit, man. I do not give a shit about any of those last few things that they mentioned. He was given his oyster farm by a family friend, and it's not clear that it does much business. He doesn't take a salary, and his mother's restaurant is his biggest customer. Platner could relate to disaffected Maine voters, the thinking went, because like many of them, he had never quite found his footing in life. According to this school of thought, his main qualification was a lack thereof. Platner had nothing on which to hang his promises of political efficacy but a collection of articulated progressive beliefs. Well, that in a series of signifiers fetishized by white-collar consultants like Moraff, who think they know what working class voters want. Forearm tattoos, earrings, a cruddy trucker hat, a facility with raw shellfish, a litany of offensive Reddit posts, and a history of drinking too much. So the history of offensive Reddit posts, that's one of the things that I'm like, I don't care that much about that, generally speaking. I think everybody's going to have shit going forward in their past on the internet. And so I don't know, that's not that big of a deal to me. A history of drinking too much, that is kind of like another red flag, as they would say. Never mind that Platner's true background is more like I would rather his Reddit posts, because most of them were just like commie posts, right? Like he was just like a Socialist Rifle Association commie poster, basically. Which those I'm all fine. Those I'm all good with. But some of them obviously were, misogynistic and wrong. I would have much rather him had like Daria Lisa's Twitter posts as his history instead, where they're all just like based like ultra leftist shit or whatever. But Taken as a whole, his rugged image was so seductive to the Ivy League educated strategists who backed him that they evidently forgot to wonder whether a guy who rants online about how women are at fault for their own rapes might have a deeper record of poor judgment in his past. Like I said, that was another red flag. Another red flag that was surmountable, but you know, you don't know until you know. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. This is like, I would say that a whole bunch of our elected officials have this exact same shit in their text chats and online, forum posts and shit. Like a whole bunch of our elected officials have that exact same history. Some might look at the Platner implosion and realize that treating each one of his bad decisions, harmful actions, and personal failures as an upside for his relatability backfires spectacularly. Others are staking out the remarkable position that voters who care about a candidate's alleged sex crimes are forsaking terrorized Palestinians by revoking their support for Platner. I don't know who's saying that. After the rape allegation surfaced this week, the progressive political commentator Matt Stoller wrote on X, "The genocide in Gaza and the oligarchy supporting it are great moral sins for which we must all take responsibility. The messy personal life of Graham Platner is not." When was this posted? After the rape allegation. Okay. Well, yes. I mean, he's right. We should take accountability for or responsibility for the genocide in Gaza. I don't know if I would characterize what he did as messy personal life, though. That's a little bit rough. Having previously cheered Platner as a rejection of dim HR lady politics, Stoller argued that lawmakers like former Representative Matt Gaetz, who was found by a bipartisan House committee to have probably committed statutory rape, are net good as long as they contributed to positive policy gains in office. Well, I disagree with that assessment. I think there's a lot of voters out there who don't. I'm just being completely honest with you. I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, like there's a lot of people who are so pissed off at the Trump administration right now that they don't give a shit, right? And they will become dead enders, like I'm telling you. Like Gaetz' backing of legislation supporting sexual harassment victims. In conclusion, Stoller wrote, "I reject that the personal decency of an individual has much to do with their politics." I also don't necessarily think that the personal decency, of an individual has a lot to do with their politics, to an extent, right? I think that I don't even think that Graham Platner doesn't believe his left populist message. Like, I think he is a narcissist, and I think that's what he craves most of all. However, I also think I do think that he is I think he's very similar to the average American in terms of like his belief system in his head, which is incredibly reactionary on some things, but also incredibly left populist on others, right? But anyway, but obviously, I think my personal assessment is that credible allegations of rape are disqualifying. So, setting aside the foolish contention that one's personal actions have no bearings on one's capacity for political leadership, people who treat women like garbage are not the only ones with good politics. There are certainly plenty of other rough around the edge Mainers with progressive ideals out there. I'm willing to bet that only a few of them lie to their wives about sexting other women. And I'm willing to bet that only a few of them lie to their wives about sexting other women. I would guess that a lot of them do. Surely even fewer have Nazi tattoos. I think you'd be surprised. Our Pete Hegseth has a Nazi tattoo. He's our Secretary of War. But each time a new and disturbing Platner story landed, the Reddit posts, the tattoo, the alleged physical abuse, the sexting, the rape allegation. Okay. One of these is not like the other. One of these is not like the other. This last one is not like the other. Platner's team responded with an almost Trumpian playbook. They disparaged the media, played it off as a targeted attack by a vengeful political establishment, and insinuated that each scandal only made Platner more authentically Maine. If voters don't want one of Marath's vat-grown people, the Platner's camp suggested this is what's left. This is an insulting view of actual working-class Mainers, but after all the bluster about how Platner was building an unprecedented coalition of Mainers who loved him even more for his many, many flaws, we're left to decide. Is the vibes first, lightly vet later method an effective way to bring Trump-leaning demographics back to the Democratic Party? To answer that question, it's worth considering how likely it was that pre-implosion Platner was on a path to victory. This is a confusing article, man. I don't know what they're trying to say. I'm going to be honest. I don't know what they're trying to say so far. A recent New York Times Portland Press Herald Siena poll of Maine voters holds some answers. In the late June poll, taken after the sexting revelation and the physical abuse claims, but before the rape accusation, Republican incumbent Susan Collins beat Platner among non-college educated white voters by 23 points. In 2020, are you sure? Are you sure? I thought he was by far polling the best against Susan Collins than like any of the other candidates. Amongst non-college educated white voters. Sorry, this is only a specific demographic. So Trump voters, essentially. So Susan Collins beat Platner among non-college educated white voters, aka normal average Republican voters, by 23 points. In 2020, the last time Collins was up for re-election, she beat Democrat Sarah Gideon among that same demographic by 23 points. In other words, Platner seemed to have no real pull with the demographic he supposedly represented. Well, that's interesting. That's one poll. I would have to see, more information, because I do think that he would have gotten more independence and stuff. So maybe it's not that particular demographic of non-college educated white voters. But Platner doesn't seem to be wooing many registered Republicans either. Just 7% of poll participants said they support him. The new reports have quoted a few Trump voters who sounded open to voting for Platner. The poll found only 4% willing to do so. In fact, Mainers who voted for Kamala Harris were more likely to side with Collins than Trump voters were to side Mainers who voted for Kamala Harris were more likely to side with Collins than Trump voters were to side with Platner. I would have to look at all of these statistics, because everything that I've read, all of the stats that I've read before, is that like left economic populism is like polls more Republicans. Like it just does than standard neoliberalism. So like that, it just seems hard. It seems hard for me to like this just doesn't pass the smell test for me, to be honest. It just doesn't. But I would have to look into it a little bit deeper. But there is one demographic that has swung hard to the left since Collins ran last: white people with college degrees. Last time around, white college-educated voters supported the Democratic Party by a 13-point margin. This year, in the recent poll, they went for Platner by a whopping 37 points. Education is far from a perfect corollary for class. Still, it is striking that, well, yeah, because most people, I think, here's the thing. Most people who are college educated aren't working in their field really anymore. That's like almost a bygone era. Like a lot of people who are college educated are working as baristas or McDonald's workers or whatever, right? The idea of the college education being a vehicle out like to the middle class is, I think, basically dead now. Education is far from a perfect corollary for class. Still, it is striking that the candidate lauded as a relatable working-class college dropout everyman seems just as unpopular among non-college voters as his polished predecessor from the political establishment. And while the 2020 exit polls did not ask about income, the income data from the 2026 poll paints a related picture. A majority of respondents who supported Collins make under $100,000 a year. A majority of respondents who supported Collins make under $100,000 a year. A plurality, the Platner supporters make $100,000 or more. The voters, I mean, you need to show me these numbers, man. That could mean a lot of stuff. Like I would need to know the actual stats on that, but sure. The voters Platner swayed were the college-educated ones, the same voters who are rapidly realigning with Democrats across the country, a trend Trump has accelerated. They may have supported whatever Democrat was on the ballot, but it also makes perfect sense that in a race where class signifiers were treated as the be-all, end-all of political merit, the voters most swayed by Platner may have more in common with the strategist who chose him than with the candidate himself. This was a bad article, man. Dude, they gave me so much hope at the beginning. But they didn't assess anything. And this entire thing was just like, it just felt like they were just shitting on, like, I don't know. Like, I agree. I agree that aesthetics can't be the end all be all. I do agree with that 100%. We should have better standards, and we should have, processes for selecting these people. My assessment is that the DSA and the left more broadly didn't have the capacity to choose an actual candidate here. Like, that's the main problem. If we could have chosen a candidate, oh my gosh, my camera is going stupid again. 1 second. What if I do this, does it work? No. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Focus, auto, apply. Okay, there we go. I don't know why it does that, but anyway, what I was saying was the left, I think, didn't have the capacity to choose a good candidate in this race. That's the problem. Because there was no actual left over there to pick a candidate, to organize and pick a candidate, it was up to these strategists, these political strategists. And while these political strategists might be good at certain parts of their job, right, I don't think that they are good at picking candidates. If you look at like the DSA candidates, none of them have had any problems like this, right? Like because they're organized around the movement, and they are picking people that they trust, and they are picking people who have a long history of being trustworthy, right? So like, I think that you just need someone with the actual, with the history of actions to back up their credentials as being a left populist. I think that's the main thing. And I also I don't know. I would have to look into this more, because this just seems wrong to me. Like maybe in one poll or something, but my assessment has and also I guess conditions are different too. But my everything that I've read has shown that like the left populist economic message has been better at swaying Republicans than neoliberal corporate centrism. But anyway, okay, I'm done with Platner. That's enough Platner discourse. Hope you liked it. I'm sure there'll be no unhinged comments. I am sure that it will be completely and totally everyone will have complete and total nuanced perspectives and will not be completely unhinged in the comments. We'll see. Only time will tell.